Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. I would say that was all things considered, Lauren, a pretty good weekend for the ACC, right?
Here's the thing. What I think the nation learned about ACC football is what we all already knew. Well, most of us, except for, I guess, like the most self-loathing ones among us. But we all
Yeah.
already knew that the ACC is not top-tier football necessarily. But you know what it is week in and week out? It's entertaining, and you never know what's going to happen. It can be entertaining for bad reasons, like Wake Forest, Virginia Tech. It can be entertaining for good reasons, and sometimes both. Like you see poor decisions being made, you see all kinds of things happening that you're like, I've never seen that happen in a football game before. You only get that in the ACC, and I feel like when you see bad offense in the ACC, it's not for lack of trying, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like you see bad offense from Iowa, and it's like they're trolling their own fan base or something. It's like they're trying to see how bad he can be on offense before they run him out of town. The ACC doesn't have teams that actively hate offense. They're really trying to be good at it, and they just sometimes aren't. So, like, that's the thing about it. You can't tell me that's not a more exciting product than whatever Iowa did on the field last weekend.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. We spent Saturday's ACC Panic Room discussing, obviously the local stories, NC State and Carolina's bonkers wins on the road in Greenville and at App State. We didn't spend any time talking about Duke, and I think Duke is in the category of a lot of other teams that we saw in the ACC this weekend, like Miami as well. You commend them for taking care of business in emphatic fashion, right? But I don't think the stories are written yet. In a way, Mike Elko's debut on Friday for the Blue Devils was nice in that Duke looked like they gave a damn again. Which,
Right.
unfortunately, the last two seasons of the David Cutcliffe era, there were times where you wondered, what's going on here, guys? So I think the needed shot in the arm for Duke football presented itself on Friday night.
Part of
Now,
my
what is,
issue with Duke, though, is it was on during Serena. So sorry, guys, I did not watch. I'm sorry. I was watching
yeah,
Serena. I knew it
yeah,
could be your last match. Sorry, not sorry.
yeah.
Also,
That's how you miss Virginia Tech offensive coordinator, the coordinator crew being stuck in an elevator because you were too busy
I
watching
did see it on
Serena.
Twitter, and thankfully,
I,
I still caught the end of that one. But I guess thankfully, I don't know if that's the word I would use. But like the
yeah,
other thing about Duke that leads us to reserve some judgment is we've seen Duke even under David Cutcliffe start out well in the beginning of a season and then just inexplicably fall in the face once you get like into conference play, right? Like we've
yeah.
seen it multiple times. We've seen them beat Power 5 opponents out of conference, and then by the time they get into conference, they're out of gas. And so that's what I'm going to be curious to see.
Now, the other thing about, again, we'll find out more about Duke this upcoming weekend against Northwestern than we did anything in their opener
Speaking
against
of
Temple,
gross games
because
to play.
Temple's bad, right? What's that?
Speaking of gross games to play, we've seen Duke and Northwestern play plenty of them.
Yes. So I think to me, outside of what happened with State and Carolina, to me the biggest storyline is going to be the Atlantic Division. I know everybody gets wrapped up in coastal chaos, right? But I feel like what we've seen so far after 1 week, it would lead me to believe that it's the Atlantic Division that's going to be the most difficult to figure out. You got NC State in their aspirations. Wake Forest, eventually Sam Hartman's going to come back. Clemson's offense leaves a lot to question going forward. Like, who's the starter going to be when NC State comes to town in a few weeks? And then you had the surprise result of Syracuse and Louisville and what to make out of that. And Boston College falling on their face against Rutgers, even though they got a good coach and a good quarterback. So to me, the Atlantic seems to be the one there's going to be some surprising results and maybe not so in the coastal.
So you think that it's going to be Atlantic Anarchy?
It's going to be Atlantic Anarchy this season.
I think that there's a certain sense of irony in the fact that during one of the Atlantic's best years or deepest years, it could look a lot like the coastal. I can think of some reasons for that, y'all. It's for the same reasons that back in the day, I used to preach that the coastal wasn't as bad as all y'all were saying, because there was a time in the coastal division where literally anyone could beat anyone and there were no easy games. And you have that, I think, in the Atlantic this year. Look at Syracuse. Look what they did to Louisville. I was like, where did that come from? And then Louisville, ugh. Like, is Louisville going to be that team that everybody beats up on? I still think that's unclear. Is Boston College going to be that? We still don't know. So I don't think there's any rollover.
I don't think Boston College is going to be the team that people roll over. It might be Louisville because we don't know the status of Scott Satterfield, where that experiment going to Louisville has not worked out, and we know that
defense might be worse than North Carolina's. I'm not joking.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Now, to me, the Atlantic Division is going to be determined by 3 factors. All right, I think it's going to be determined by how Wake Forest overcomes the absence of Sam Hartman. I think it's going to be determined by how Clemson figures out their offense and what their identity is going to be going forward. And then it's going to come down to what we talked about on Saturday with NC State. Shout out to Bud Elliott of the Cover 3 podcast, who we've known for a long time. He kind of ranted on NC State making things more difficult than they needed to be. We talked about this on Saturday, where it's like, how'd you describe it? You got this Ferrari, but you're putting just like normal fuel and never taking it out of second gear.
No, you're riding in the far right lane with your cautions on, and
I made the reference. I need more, midnight vultures back, not sea change back. When it comes to their play calling, it seems like NC State has weapons, but they haven't fully unleashed it, and they might not, because that's the personality of State. It's kind of like this whole slow and steady thing. And Bud's whole thing was, why are you making it more difficult than it needs to be offensively?
Yeah,
totally get that.
Yes.
The same thing could be said for Clemson's offense. But I don't know if that's more along the lines of, this is what they have in DJ Uiagalelei, and they're trying to make that work until the next guy steps up. Or they're also kind of in the same boat where they haven't evolved offensively in terms of scheme, and we're seeing that come home to roost when the talent isn't at the level where it's been the last couple of years, especially with the transfer portal opening things up just about everywhere.
Yeah, and they've got a new offensive coordinator, obviously, since Virginia hired Tony Elliott, so that shouldn't be necessarily dismissed either. They've definitely had some turnover at that spot in the last couple of years, and that's probably taking a bit of a toll, even on a program like that. So, I think that they still have time. I will say this. Let's remember that this Clemson team started out last year looking like hot garbage, like way worse than we saw them look in game 1. I know they were playing Georgia, but even not against Georgia. Like, they just looked terrible. And then they really sneakily got it together as the season went on. Like, they did. They got it together, and they looked I thought they looked way, way, way better by the end of the year. So I'm not willing to, kind of completely dismiss Clemson or, push the panic button, but you're right.
Not with that defense. Because that's what got them through. Their defense is so good, yeah. Their defense is so good.
It's excellent.
And that's ultimately what made them almost bully ball-like to scratch out the end of the year the way that they did.
Right.
Can you sustain that throughout the course of the season? Well, when you got the talent level they have and they play the defense they have, I'm going to like their chances. But to me, it's Dave Doran talked about it going into the ECU game, and I think it's going to continue that way. That if they handle they're too old of a team to be making the kind of mistakes and the miscues it did in week 1. Do you chalk that up to just, hey, it's week 1, college football, crazy things happen, you haven't figured it out, and things will sort themselves out over the next couple of weeks leading into that Clemson game? Entirely possible. Or maybe this team just kind of is what they've been the last 2 years, and they're just going to have to ride that out, where it's going to be slow, steady, not sexy, but they're going to be in every game down to the end. But the problem with that is the Atlantic has gotten better, and we'll close with the conversation about Florida State. I know Giglio's been on this as it relates to how bad Florida State was when Norvell took over, and it's been this slow build to get them back. I think we all agree that the Jimbo Fisher departure left that team a lot more depleted than they wanted to admit. And Norvell's had to slowly build this back up. Now, they almost did it to Notre Dame last year. They did it to LSU this year. Is that the building block that gets them to be sneaky more competitive to ruin some seasons as the year goes on? Or was that more about Brian Kelly having a team that he doesn't like and they don't like him, and that kind of came to fruition in week 1 in Baton Rouge?
I think it's kind of hard to say. I mean, I will. Well, technically, it was in New Orleans because
it was New Orleans, but I say Baton Rouge.
I was going to say if it were in Baton Rouge, maybe things totally go a little differently. Who knows?
When I say Baton Rouge, I'm talking about how things have been playing out with Brian Kelly and that team.
Yeah. But I mean, I think for sure what impressed me about Florida State was that defense. Like, it really took until the end of the game for LSU to really get much going. Some of that, I think, was the way LSU was calling plays, but you can see that there's legit talent on that D-line. They've got a rotation of guys, which they haven't had in quite some time. It seems like those guys are kind of buying in, all the buzzwords you want to say. They seem to get it, and they're talented. And so that's a big difference for them, for sure, from the last, like, their defense was better last year, but it looks to be way better this year. We'll see.
Yeah.
And then offensively, look, I know Jordan Travis has his issues. I know Mike Norvell pitched it at the goal line. By the way, don't at me with that. Like, that's one play of an entire game, and you want to be like, oh, you like the pitch on the goal line too? No, but just because that doesn't negate the fact that he's a creative play caller and he's fun to watch. His offenses are fun to watch. They do creative things. I also think, like, and I love Jordan Travis. He's not always going to be the most accurate, but like, he just finds a way to make plays. Like, we've seen it over his career at FSU. I just think he's a gamer. I think he's great. And honestly, like, this is gonna sound such like a coach thing to say, but it's kind of true. You know, they all talk about all three phases of the game, but like, special teams was just dominant. And we've seen that in recent years with Florida State too. So the way they've kind of changed, like, think about what they did to North Carolina. They don't upset North Carolina in that game without their special teams. Yeah. They don't get this upset without special teams either. And I think that they've been so good there that, you know, it helps you win games. I mean, it really does. If you can do things like that, if you can out-scheme the opponent on special teams, I think it makes a big difference. And we've seen a lot of that from Florida State. So they're interesting.
Or you could just not participate in special teams the way that Georgia Tech did to close out the half against Clemson when the game was tight. I don't know what Jeff Collins was doing there, man. You had timeouts. You had time. If North Carolina App State taught us anything, you could score pretty quick, all things considered.
Well, maybe not against that defense.
Maybe not against that defense that way, but it wasn't like the game was out of reach and you basically signaled to your squad, now we're good. We'll just give him the ball back to start.
I feel like he let the ATL down.
Yeah. Waffle House is open 24 hours, my guy. Like, you were in no rush to go get your hash brown smothered and covered. I'm just saying. It was going to be there. It was going to be there when the game ended, no matter how quickly you got out of there. It made no sense to me. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We'll see you all this weekend.